400 years ago, Amsterdam was little more than a modest town of 30,000 inhabitants, nestled along its canals and marketplace. Yet, within a few decades, it would become the stage for one of the greatest economic revolutions in human history, the rise of capitalism as we know it. What began as the ambition of a few merchants soon transformed into a global project, reshaping commerce, politics, and society. In the spring of 1594, near Dam Square, the heart of Amsterdam men gathered in the house of Martin Spil, a brewer by trade. They were merchants dealing in wood, salt, and herring, staples of Amsterdam's growing economy. But their conversation that morning turned to a far more lucrative prize, the spice trade of South Asia. At the time, this trade was monopolized by Portugal, which had established a chain of fortified posts stretching from Africa to Asia. For Amsterdam's merchants, breaking that monopoly became both an obsession and an opportunity. Among those present was Dirk van Os, a dynamic trader originally from Antwerp. Like many others, he was a refugee, having fled the religious wars that tore through the Low Countries. When Antwerp, the wealthiest commercial city in Europe, fell under Spanish Catholic control, half its population departed. Many chose Amsterdam, carrying with them both capital and expertise. These newcomers brought a new spirit of enterprise, fueling the city's ambitions. To realize their dream, the merchants turned to Cornelius de Houtman, who spent years in Lisbon gathering intelligence on spice routes. In 1595, he set sail with 3 ships and nearly 250 men. The voyage was plagued by scurvy, mutiny, and Portuguese hostility. After more than 2 years, only 80 men returned, skeletal and weary. Yet they carried with them sacks of pepper-proof that the route could be conquered. Though the expedition was a financial disaster, it sparked something greater, the realization that Amsterdam had the means, knowledge, and daring to challenge the world's mightiest empires. If Amsterdam was to turn ambition into dominance, it required more than courage. It needed ships fast, sturdy, and built in great numbers. At precisely this moment, an invention emerged that would change everything. Cornelis Cornelizoen, a mill owner from the village of Augeest, developed a simple yet revolutionary device, the crankshaft. By converting circular windmill motion into vertical sawing power, it allowed timber to be cut 30 times faster than before. The innovation slashed costs and accelerated production, transforming the Netherlands into Europe's leading shipyard. With this new advantage, Amsterdam became a factory of maritime expansion. Dozens of expeditions were launched, and by the turn of the century, 75 ships had set sail for Asia. They returned laden with pepper, nutmeg, and cloves commodities worth fortunes in Europe. The effect was electrifying. Writers described church bells ringing across Amsterdam as these ships docked, their holds brimming with wealth. In just a few years, expeditions brought back 9 million guilders, a sum equal to the entire national debt Holland had amassed during its long war with Spain. But unrestrained competition threatened to ruin this success. Dozens of small companies vied for the same Asian ports, driving up prices and provoking Portuguese and Spanish retaliation. The solution was bold: merge the competing ventures into one powerful enterprise. In April 1602, Dirk van Os transformed a room in his home into a temporary office. Here, the Verenigd Oostindische Company, better known as the Dutch East India Company, or VOC, was founded. For the first time in history, ordinary citizens could buy shares in a corporation. Artisans, smiths, carpenters, even housekeepers invested their savings, joining merchants in a collective venture. The VOC was not just a company. It was the birth of modern capitalism. It centralized risk, mobilized unprecedented resources, and linked everyday citizens to global trade. In Amsterdam's narrow streets and humble houses, the foundations of a global economic system were laid. The creation of the VOC in 1602 solved one problem but introduced another. Investors were accustomed to financing single voyages, withdrawing their money once ships returned. Now, they were asked to lock their capital for 10 years, a daunting prospect for small tradesmen and craftsmen who had joined the venture. The solution emerged spontaneously on a bridge near Amsterdam's harbor, where sellers of VOC shares met with eager buyers. When the weather turned foul, they moved inside the abandoned St. Olaf Church. In these informal meetings, modern stock trading was born. The process was straightforward. A deal struck on the bridge or in the church was later confirmed with signatures and stamps at the VOC headquarters. Efficiency, transparency, and trust gave this marketplace legitimacy. Soon, the activity demanded a dedicated building. Hendrik de Keyser, Amsterdam's leading architect, was commissioned to design it. Drawing inspiration from stock exchanges in Antwerp and London, he created a purpose-built exchange, inaugurated in 1611. Unlike its predecessors, however, Amsterdam's market traded not just commodities, but company shares. This was the first true stock exchange in world history. At the same time, the city itself was transforming. Freed temporarily from the financial burden of war with Spain, Amsterdam launched an ambitious urban expansion. 10 square kilometers of marshland were drained, 100 bridges built, and 3,000 houses constructed. In the space of 3 decades, the city grew from 30,000 to more than 100,000 inhabitants, making it the 3rd largest city in Europe. The combination of global trade, technological innovation, and financial ingenuity turned Amsterdam into the beating heart of early capitalism. Here, finance and politics intertwined, wealth and risk were democratized, and the city became a laboratory for urban and social modernity. It was not merely a trading port anymore, but the prototype of the global city. While Amsterdam was pioneering capitalism, London remained, in many respects, a medieval city. Confined within its Roman walls, it was crowded with timber houses, narrow streets, and guild traditions. Yet beneath this old facade, a new power was emerging. England's transformation had its unlikely origins in catastrophe, the Black Death. In the mid-14th century, half the population perished, leaving vast tracts of land unworked. Landowners turned from crops to sheep farming, and wool became England's greatest asset. For 2 centuries, London's merchants exported raw wool, much of it to the Netherlands, where skilled weavers turned it into fine cloth. But by the 17th century, a new idea took hold. Why not produce the cloth at home and profit from the added value? To achieve this, London welcomed foreign talent, Dutch weavers, and French Huguenot refugees skilled in textile craftsmanship. They settled in the city's eastern quarters, building houses with lofts designed for weaving looms. Their industry laid the foundation for London's economic surge. As trade expanded, London's population exploded from 250,000 to 500,000 within 50 years. The city spilled beyond its walls toward Westminster, alarming monarchs who feared uncontrolled growth. Kings James I and Charles I attempted to impose royal grandeur on the city, envisioning palaces and orderly avenues. But unlike absolute monarchies on the continent, English sovereigns were constrained by Parliament and by the fiercely independent City of London. Conflict between crown and city deepened, fueling the English Civil War. Charles I was executed in 1649, and Oliver Cromwell's Republic briefly held sway. Paradoxically, this turmoil strengthened London's commercial class. It was during this era that formal banking emerged. Jewish financiers, allowed back into England under Cromwell, established offices in Lombard Street. They introduced new financial practices, marking London's shift from a trading hub to a financial center. By mid-century, London was on the path to becoming Amsterdam's fiercest rival. It had found its strength not only in trade, but in finance. As Amsterdam and London vied for dominance across Europe, a third city was quietly taking shape across the Atlantic. Founded as New Amsterdam by the Dutch West India Company in 1624, it was envisioned as a strategic outpost for trade with the Americas. The colony attracted settlers from the lowest rungs of European society, young men and women, refugees and adventurers with little to lose. They carried with them the spirit of Amsterdam, tolerance, diversity, and commerce. Although the Dutch would eventually lose the settlement to the English, renaming it New York, the imprint of Amsterdam remained. The city inherited the Dutch commitment to trade, multi-ethnic coexistence, and ambitious urban design. These values would later underpin its transformation into the great vertical metropolis of the modern age. Meanwhile, Amsterdam continued its golden age, exporting its ideas worldwide. Its urban planning with orderly canals, regulated neighborhoods, and elegant canal houses was revolutionary. The very concept of the nuclear family, housed in a private home with a garden, spread outward from its canals to the New World. Public institutions such as orphanages and almshouses were designed with the same dignity as palaces, reflecting a society that fused wealth with civic responsibility. Yet Amsterdam's dominance was not eternal. By the late 17th century, London's vast textile industry, growing financial power, and expanding population began to eclipse the Dutch Republic. The wars between the two nations underscored the shifting balance. London would eventually emerge as the world's financial capital, just as Amsterdam had earlier pioneered the tools of capitalism. New York, inheriting from both cities, carried the legacy forward into the 20th century. Its skyline became the new symbol of urban ambition. Together, these three cities, Amsterdam, London, and New York, tell the story of how global capitalism was born, reshaped, and projected onto the world stage. Their intertwined destinies changed not only their own horizons, but the very course of human history.